Over the years, Wingstop has become synonymous with Rick Ross after he opened multiple locations across the Mid-South. A new report by the U.S. Department of Labor suggests the Grammy Award-winning artist has been cooking up more than just fire music. It says Boss Wing Enterprises violated labor laws at least 5 locations in Mississippi.
Rick Ross.
First, Ross calls these violations mistakes. That word choice, very intentional. A mistake sounds accidental, something unplanned, like miscalculating a number or forgetting a detail. But what happened at Boss Wings Enterprises wasn't accidental. This was a systematic pattern of illegal wage practices and child labor violations that allegedly went on for years. You don't accidentally pay workers under minimum wage. You don't accidentally make illegal deductions. You don't accidentally schedule a 15-year-old past legal working hours. These were deliberate decisions by those running the company. By labeling them mistakes, Ross is trying to soften the blow, make it sound like an honest error rather than alleged exploitation. Second, he talks about taking accountability. That phrase has become a PR crutch in modern crises. It sounds responsible, like you're owning up, but let's be real. What does it mean here? Ross didn't personally apologize to the underpaid workers. He didn't acknowledge the impact on the teams who were overworked. He didn't break down how it happened or who made the decisions. He just said he was taking accountability in the vaguest way possible. True accountability would involve naming what went wrong, who was responsible, explaining the fixes, and making things right for the harmed workers. His statement didn't do any of that. Third, he promised it wouldn't happen again, but there were no specifics, no explanation of what systems would be implemented, who would be held responsible, or how oversight would prevent future violations. Without details, that promise is basically meaningless. What Ross was really doing here was controlling the narrative and protecting his brand. He knew that ignoring the scandal or outright denying it would make things worse, so he got ahead of it, admitted just enough to look responsible, and tried to move on fast. And honestly, a lot of people bought it. Ross has a loyal fan base, and many gave him the benefit of the doubt. They thought, okay, he admitted it, he's gonna fix it, let's move on. Some even argued he probably wasn't involved in daily operations and didn't know what was happening. But here's the issue with that defense. Ignorance isn't an excuse. If you own a business or your family owns one with your name attached, you're responsible for how it operates. You can't profit from a company and then claim you had no idea what was going on. And let's be real, Ross made Wingstop a central part of his public image. He constantly talked about it, posted on social media, and used it to bolster his image as a savvy businessman. He happily took credit for the success, but when illegal practices surfaced, suddenly it was just mistakes. Meanwhile, the workers who were exploited aren't just going to move on. They lost money they needed for rent, food, and basic living expenses. The teenagers who were overworked lost time they should have spent on school, sleep, and being kids. These are real consequences that don't vanish because Ross posted a vague apology online. Even Wingstop Corporate had to respond. While Boss Wings Enterprises was an independent franchisee, these violations happened under the Wingstop brand. Corporate issued a statement emphasizing that these restaurants were independently owned and operated and that they weren't aware of the Department of Labor investigation or the violations until it came to light. The takeaway? Ross may have crafted a smooth PR response, but the impact on workers and miners was real, and calling it a mistake doesn't change that.
Here's the breakdown. The department recovered $51,674 in back wages and liquidated damages for the underpaid workers. What does that mean? Back wages, the money workers were legally owed but didn't receive, the gap between what they actually got and what they should have earned under minimum wage laws. Liquidated damages, an additional penalty equal to the back wages, designed to punish the employer and compensate employees for being denied their rightful pay. So that $51,674 represents $25,837 in stolen wages, plus $25,837 in liquidated damages. On top of that, the Department of Labor hit Boss Wings Enterprises with $62,753 in civil money penalties, fines paid to the government as punishment and to deter future violations. In total, the company had to shell out around $114,427 to resolve the case. Now, let's put this into perspective. For a business running multiple franchise locations generating millions in annual revenue, $114,427 is a drop in the bucket. Honestly, it's more like a slap on the wrist. And that's one of the frustrating realities of wage theft enforcement. The penalties often are big enough to truly sting. If you're a multi-million-dollar operation, you might see it as a calculated risk. Underpay workers, pocket the extra profits, and if caught, pay a relatively minor fine. But here's where this case got real: the public exposure. The Department of Labor doesn't quietly settle these cases. They issue press releases, publish the violations, and name the companies involved. And when the company in question is owned by Rick Ross, suddenly it's headline news. Hip-hop blogs, entertainment sites, business publications, everyone picked up the story. Social media was buzzing, and for a man whose brand is built on being a boss and a savvy entrepreneur, that kind of negative spotlight is a huge problem. After the penalties went public, Rick Ross had to respond. His move? Classic damage control. He took to social media and acknowledged the violations, posting something along the lines of, "When you run a business, mistakes happen." He emphasized taking accountability, promised to fix the issues, and claimed he'd ensure they wouldn't happen again. But here's the thing: if you read between the lines, this is a masterclass in PR spin. The messaging is polished, the tone is humble, and accountability is framed in a way that protects the brand. Ross's statement was less about admitting wrongdoing and more about controlling the narrative, shifting attention from systemic wage and labor violations to mistakes that are being fixed. And in the world of celebrity business, that can sometimes be just as powerful as the fines themselves. Here's the real breakdown of Rick Ross's response and why it's classic PR spin.
Federal child labor laws exist for one reason: to protect minors from being exploited at work. The rules are especially strict for 14 and 15-year-olds because that age group is considered particularly vulnerable. The law is designed to make sure young teens have time for school, homework, rest, and simply being kids. Here's what federal law says. 14 and 15-year-olds can work, but under tight restrictions. They cannot work more than 3 hours on a school day, 18 hours in a school week, 8 hours on a non-school day, or 40 hours in a non-school week. They also can't work before 7 a.m. or after 7 p.m., except during the summer period, June 1 through Labor Day, when they're allowed to work until 9 p.m. Those limits aren't random. They exist because education is supposed to come first. Overworking teenagers can hurt their grades, their health, and their development. The law recognizes there's a clear power imbalance between a teenage worker and an employer, and it puts guardrails in place to prevent abuse. But according to the Department of Labor's findings, Boss Wings Enterprises wasn't following those guardrails. Investigators reported record-keeping violations, meaning the company wasn't properly tracking the hours minor employees were working. And that alone is a serious red flag, because accurate records are required specifically to prevent child labor violations. But it didn't stop there. The investigation identified at least one instance where a 15-year-old employee worked beyond federal hour limits. That means a minor, a high school student, was scheduled past what the law allows. Pause and really think about that. A 15-year-old is likely balancing classes, homework, maybe sports or clubs, maybe even family responsibilities. They need sleep, they need downtime, they need space to grow. Federal law is built around protecting that balance. And according to investigators, that balance wasn't being respected. Here's the reality about hiring teenagers. When you bring minors into the workforce, the responsibility to protect them is even higher. The rules are crystal clear, and when those rules aren't followed, it's not just a technical violation, it's a serious legal issue. Here's the situation. There's a massive power imbalance. At 15, working your first job, you don't know your rights. You don't realize your employer is breaking the law by scheduling illegal hours. You just follow orders because you need the paycheck and you're terrified of getting fired or in trouble. That dynamic makes it far too easy for employers to exploit young workers. And according to federal findings, that's exactly what was happening at Boss Wings Enterprises. The fact that they weren't even keeping proper records of minor employees' hours is a huge red flag. Accurate record keeping is legally required. Forgetting to track hours? That usually points to knowing the law is being broken and hoping no one notices. After completing their investigation, the United States Department of Labor took action against Boss Wings Enterprises. And while the financial penalties might not seem massive compared to the millions these restaurants pull in, the public fallout was major. The Fair Labor Standards Act, which has been federal law since 1938, clearly establishes minimum wage, overtime requirements, and child labor protections. One of its key rules is straightforward. Employers cannot deduct money from paychecks if those deductions reduce an employee's effective wage below minimum wage. Again, the only consistent exceptions are things like taxes and court-ordered garnishments. Business expenses? That's on the employer, not the worker. So why would Boss Wings Enterprises take that risk? According to the broader context of labor enforcement in the restaurant industry, wage violations are unfortunately common, especially in fast food and quick service restaurants. Many workers are young, inexperienced, and unfamiliar with their rights. For some, it's their first job. They don't always know what's legal and what crosses the line. And when employees don't realize something is illegal, issues can continue quietly until regulators step in. And in 2022, that's exactly what happened. Most workers in these situations don't push back. Why? Because they're scared. Scared of losing their job, scared of retaliation. For someone barely making minimum wage, rocking the boat can feel like risking everything. Even if employees know their rights, filing a complaint with the United States Department of Labor isn't exactly simple. You've got to gather documents, fill out paperwork, possibly sit through interviews and an investigation. If you're already stretched thin financially, that process can feel overwhelming. And let's be real, franchise businesses are hard to police. There are thousands of franchise locations nationwide, operating under hundreds of brands. The Department of Labor doesn't have unlimited resources to audit every store. That means a lot of violations slip through the cracks. Some employers know that, and they gamble on it. According to investigators, Boss Wings Enterprises appeared to be banking on the idea that workers wouldn't speak up, and even if someone did, maybe nothing would happen. The assumption seemed to be that those small illegal deductions could quietly stack up without anyone noticing. But someone noticed. Whether it was a current employee, a former worker, or someone on the outside who saw what was happening, a complaint was filed. And once the Department of Labor started digging, they reportedly uncovered a pattern that couldn't be brushed off. The fact that these practices allegedly continued for years before being flagged says a lot about how the operation was running. Investigators didn't describe this as a one-time oversight. They outlined repeated violations that affected multiple workers over time. And if the wage issues weren't serious enough, the investigation uncovered something even more concerning: child labor violations. Now, we're in even heavier territory.
Illegal paycheck deductions. Workers at certain Wingstop locations were reportedly required to cover business-related expenses straight out of their own paychecks. We're talking uniforms, safety training, background checks, even cash register shortages. Now, some people might say, isn't that normal? No, not when it pushes pay below minimum wage. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, if deductions drag an employee's effective hourly rate under the federal minimum, that's a violation, period. There are limited exceptions: taxes, Social Security, Medicare, court-ordered garnishments. But employer-required costs like uniforms or training, those cannot legally drop someone under minimum wage. Let me paint the picture. Say you're earning $7.25 an hour, and you work 40 hours in a week. That's $290 gross pay. Now imagine $30 gets deducted for a uniform, $20 for a background check, $15 for safety training, and $25 because the register came up short one shift. That's $90 gone. Now you're left with $200 for 40 hours. That breaks down to $5 an hour. That's $2.25 below the federal minimum wage. And according to the United States Department of Labor, this wasn't an isolated situation. Investigators described it as a widespread, systematic practice across multiple Boss Wings Enterprises locations. Multiple employees were affected, and it reportedly went on for years. Now here's the part that really fuels the conversation. While workers were allegedly struggling on less than minimum wage, Rick Ross was living larger than life. The man owns a 109-room mansion. He regularly posts luxury cars, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Maybachs, Rolls Royces on Instagram. Private jets, custom jewelry worth hundreds of thousands, 5-star restaurants around the globe. The contrast? It's hard to ignore. You've got a multi-millionaire rapper whose brand is built around being the boss, showcasing wealth and executive energy, while federal findings say workers at the bottom of his franchise operation were being underpaid. These are employees working long shifts in hot kitchens, handling rush hours, managing customers, and allegedly not even receiving full minimum wage after deductions. That's not a paperwork mistake. That's a legal issue. So how is this illegal, and how did it allegedly continue for so long?
And to be fair, he delivered. Over the years, Ross released multiple platinum albums and founded Maybach Music Group in 2009, signing artists like Meek Mill, Whale, and French Montana. MMG quickly became one of hip-hop's most successful independent labels, with Ross executive producing projects and steering the ship. But he consistently made one thing clear: music was just the foundation. In interviews, he preached ownership, diversification, and building income streams that could survive long after the rap spotlight fades. That message hit hard in hip-hop culture, where the ultimate goal has always been to make it out and build something lasting. By the early 2010s, Ross was making major moves beyond music. He purchased the former estate of Evander Holyfield in Georgia, a massive 109-room mansion sitting on 235 acres, complete with a bowling alley, movie theater, and indoor pool. The price tag? $5.8 million, plus millions more in renovations. On top of that, he invested in real estate, launched luxury car washes, and expanded a business portfolio that stretched far beyond entertainment, positioning himself as more than just a rapper, but a full-blown businessman. But the business move that really became Rick Ross's signature play was Wingstop. And this is exactly where the story starts to take a sharp turn. Let me break down how Rick Ross stepped into the Wingstop game, and why, at the time, it looked like a genius power move. Around 2011, Ross began investing in Wingstop franchise locations. If you're not familiar with franchising, here's the simple version. Wingstop is the parent company. They own the brand, the recipes, the marketing, the whole blueprint. But individual franchise owners run the actual stores. They pay fees and royalties to corporate, but they control daily operations and keep the majority of the profits. For someone like Rick Ross, this setup made perfect sense. You get a nationally recognized brand with built-in systems and support, but you're the one calling the shots locally and collecting the revenue. It's wealth building without starting from zero. And Ross didn't just test the waters with 1 or 2 stores, he went all in. Over roughly a decade, his portfolio reportedly grew to about 25 to 30 Wingstop locations across multiple states, heavily concentrated in the Southeast. That's not a side hustle, that's a serious operation. Let's talk numbers. The average Wingstop location pulls in between $1 million and $1.5 million in annual sales, So if Ross owned 25 stores on the conservative side, that's somewhere between $25 million and $37.5 million in gross annual revenue across the portfolio. Now, before anyone gets carried away, gross revenue isn't pure profit. You've got food costs, labor, rent, franchise fees, and plenty of other expenses. But even after those deductions, profit margins can be strong if the business is run tight and efficient.
Rick Ross, the billionaire rapper, the Wingstop mogul, was living in a 109-room mansion, posting Rolls-Royces and private jets, while teenagers at his Wingstop restaurants were being underpaid, overworked, and forced to break federal labor laws. This isn't just a business story. It's a scandal that exposes how the rich exploit the powerless. Rick Ross was posted up in a 109-room mansion, flexing his Rolls-Royces and private jets on Instagram, while teenagers at his Wingstop restaurants were allegedly clocking illegal hours and earning less than minimum wage. Today, we're unpacking how one of hip-hop's biggest moguls got caught up in what federal investigators described as an illegal wage operation, and how he tried to smooth talk his way through it when the Department of Labor showed up. Before we go deeper, let's clear something up about wage theft. The U.S. Department of Labor reported that certain paycheck deductions pushed employees' average hourly pay below $7.25, the federal minimum wage. Wage theft isn't complicated. It's when workers don't get what they're legally owed. That could mean being paid under minimum wage, missing overtime pay, or facing unlawful deductions from their checks. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most people think wage theft only happens in shady back alley businesses or overseas sweatshops. But this case, it involved legitimate franchise restaurants operating right here in America. According to federal findings, Rick Ross and his family's company systematically underpaid workers, made illegal deductions, and violated child labor laws while running Wingstop locations. The company was also cited for violating child labor regulations after allowing a 15-year-old employee to work past 10 p.m. several times in June 2021. And this wasn't some tiny corner shop. We're talking about a franchise network pulling in millions in revenue. So today, we're breaking down the entire Rick Ross Wingstop controversy, from how he started building his franchise empire in 2011 to the 2022 federal investigation that uncovered wage violations across multiple locations, to the $114,427 settlement his company ultimately paid. We're going to lay out how workers were allegedly shortchanged, how minors were reportedly overworked in violation of federal law, and how Ross attempted to shape the narrative once everything started unraveling. Stick with me, because this situation runs deeper than most headlines let on. All right, let's rewind and look at how Rick Ross even reached this level in the first place. Born William Leonard Roberts II and known worldwide as Rick Ross, he exploded onto the scene in 2006 with his debut single, Hustlin'. That record was everywhere. The hook was simple, addictive, and it sparked a serious bidding war among major labels. He ultimately signed with Def Jam Recordings, and his debut album, Port of Miami, dropped later that year, debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200. From day one, Ross branded himself as the boss, not just another rapper, but a mogul in motion. His entire image centered around power moves, boardroom energy, and empire building. Sure, his lyrics referenced the streets, but he was equally vocal about investments, ownership, and stacking generational wealth.